to introduce Ambassador Jacqueline O'Neill. She is Canada's first ambassador for women, peace, and security. She was appointed by the Prime Minister in June 2019. Her primary role is to advise ministers of foreign affairs, defense, and numerous other departments engaged in implementing Canada's National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security. Previously, Ambassador O'Neill was president of the Institute for Inclusive Security, a United States-based organization that increased the inclusion of women in peace negotiations and related processes, including the reform of police and military organizations. Over 13 years at Inclusive Security, she supported the creation of national strategies and policy framework for more than 30 countries, NATO and OSCE, and the United Nations. She also worked directly with the Coalition of Women Leaders in Colombia, South Sudan, Pakistan, and beyond. Prior to that, Ambassador O'Neill worked at the United Nations Peacekeeping Mission in Sudan and at Portsmouth Afad University for Women, along with former Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire, who helped found the Romeo Dallaire Child Soldiers Initiative to eliminate the use of children during conflict. She was also a policy advisor to Canada's Secretary of State for the Asia Pacific region. Most recently, Ambassador O'Neill was a global fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center's Canada Institute, an adjunct professor at Georgetown University, and a member of the board of directors of the Canadian International Council. She has a bachelor's degree in commerce from the University of Alberta and a master's in public policy degree from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government.
Thank you, Shalonda. And thanks, Ifat and Ezra. Bonjour à tout le monde. It is a beautiful day here in Ottawa, which is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And I am just absolutely delighted to be able to join you for this launch. And looking at the list of speakers to come, we are truly among giants here today. So I will not go on about how important and wonderful their voices are and then take forever to talk myself. I'll be brief to pass it over to dear friends and colleagues, but just want to say welcome to Canada, to this organization. And even though this chapter in Canada is new, I must say I feel very attached to this organization. I knew Bonnie Jenkins, your founder, who's joining us today. When she and I were both living in Washington, D.C., we had met a few times. And when I heard that she was starting WCAPS, I basically forced her to meet with me. I remember we had iced tea and French fries, so a real meal of champions, but the two of us agreed that did constitute a meal. And I just recall thinking about what a game changer that this organization could be. And it has been, and it continues to be. We have several great feminists who've said it's not feminism if it's not intersectional. And I think we would all agree that is true. And it is also true that it is not truly women, peace, and security if it's not inclusive. As Senator Jaffer reminds us all the time, this agenda came and it emerged from the Global South, and it came from community level women with really diverse backgrounds and identities and abilities who experienced the horrors of war and really wanted to have a say in decisions that affected their own lives. And despite these origins, not all of our spaces have been welcoming enough or sufficiently inclusive, and that is really deeply problematic. I remember about 2 years ago, I taught 3 years ago, I taught a course on women, peace, and security to students at Georgetown University. And I remember there was this one super smart young woman. It was her last semester, and she was already accepted into the US Foreign Service. And near the end of the semester, I told the whole class about an event that was organized by Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security in Washington. And she told me a couple of days later that she really dug into the organization and she joined it. And she said, until that point, I really hadn't seen a role for myself in this field. And that was despite learning about the roots of the work and having read literally dozens of writers of color and watching videos in my class and having guest speakers, almost all of whom were women of color. Yet she still didn't see herself in this space until she found this community. And I remember thinking how powerful that was, and what we would have lost if she hadn't found this group. And I think about that often, and I think about how much we need the brain power and the perspectives of the members of this group, and we always have, but we especially need it right now. And I think we have a window for really making meaningful change that's as open as I have ever seen it. But we also know that that change won't happen without some hustle. And these opportunities are a result of a combination of things, including the pandemic and what it's exposed, the result of decades of leadership by Indigenous people and Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people, and activism on racial justice and communities of color across this country and the world. And we're in a space where we can acknowledge much more openly than before systemic racism and its existence in our institutions and in the way that we work. It's just so clear that we cannot be effective, we can't truly have transformational approaches to power and to women, peace, and security if we are not anti-racist, if we are not decolonizing our aid, if we think that any intervention we're engaged in can actually be this quote unquote term of neutral, and if we're not being really deliberate in every single thing that we do. And this organization has shone a light on this and so many other issues in the US and elsewhere, and I just can't wait to see what you're going to be doing here and hopefully play a small part in it. So thanks so much for the invitation to be here. Congratulations again, and I look forward to hearing from everybody else.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the inspiration. Now I will introduce our panelists. I am so excited because I feel like I've worked with you on other projects. And I'm so proud of some of the women who are actually will be speaking today. So our first panelist is Caitlin Casper. We're so honored to have you, Caitlin. I cannot emphasize enough how happy to have you on our panel. So just a bit about Caitlin. She is a professor at University of Toronto. She is and forgive me if I mispronounce, it's Anishinaabe woman from Chippewas of Georgia Island of First Nations. And she's doing something that I feel like our chapter will be focusing on, and that is to advocate for Indigenous women and Métis and Inuit perspective in representation. Our second panelist will be Senator Mobina Jafar. She is our first African-born senator. She is the first Muslim senator, and she is the first South Asian descent. And she does quite a bit of interesting work that intersects with my work at the UN also. And I'm so honored also to have you speak because we are all honored to have you all speak, just because this is so important to so many of us women of color. Our third panelist is Kati. She is the Secretary General for Amnesty International, but Kati has a very interesting background. I'm not going to go too much into it, but she hails from Burundi and she came to Canada as exile. Something that's very important to me and to many other people, and I guess many of us people who came to Canada as refugees. And that is the importance of advocacy that she has been doing on this many issues such as human rights, race, gender, and of course refugees. Our fourth panelist is Yasmin, and Yasmin, I'm being very informal because I want people to be comfortable because I feel comfortable. So it's Yasmin. So Yasmin is a Rohingya activist. She came to Canada, I believe, in 2011. And she is, in my opinion, the most prominent Rohingya voice in Canada. And she has done quite a bit of advocacy for the Rohingya people and on Burma. and our lovely, wonderful, wonderful co-moderator, moderator is Azra. She hails from Benghazi, Libya, and her family also fled Libya during Gaddafi regime, and she is currently doing her PhD at University of Toronto. Something else that she mentioned that she would be working on our chapter is she will be leading the mentorship program with our chapter. So Ezra, take it away.
Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you, Ifat, for the lovely introductions. And let's get started with the discussion. So like I said, just to remind everybody with the order, so we'll start off with Caitlin, and then Mobina, Ketty, and then Yasmin. Please just allow for about 2 to 3 minutes per response. Because we have a lot of questions to get through, and we're really looking forward to hear you guys speak. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you again for being here. Our objective with our time today is to finally launch the Canada chapter by engaging in critical discourse surrounding some social issues that are really pertinent today. However, we also want to highlight and celebrate some of the work that these incredible women have done while having a conversation that addresses and identifies some of these systemic injustices and social issues that occur not only in Canada, but also worldwide. So we really admire your commitment to diversity, equity, and social justice, and we are really looking forward to what you have to say. So our first question is, what is the most challenging aspect of advocating for racial and gender equality, and what are some of the barriers that you had to overcome? So Caitlin, you can take it off.
Oh, that's such a loaded question. I can't believe we only have an hour. I just want to kind of start off by saying miigwech to Ifat. She's done a wonderful job rounding everybody up and organizing everyone for today. And I know we're all busy, so being able to be here and to speak and discuss these important topics is an incredible privilege. So I think to answer the question in terms of challenging aspects, in the work that I do, not only teaching within various post-secondary institutions, but also as a lawyer with Aboriginal Legal Services, I've spent about a decade advocating for Indigenous rights within Canada, and especially highlighting women, two-spirited individuals and children. And I find that the most frustrating aspect is the continual denial of institutions, of state institutions and government, that there is even an issue in terms of systemic racism. I find that oftentimes key players and government officials, bureaucracies like to suggest that individual racism happens and individual denial of human rights occurs, but that when you try to tear apart the structures that support this type of racism and really allow it to be pervasive, there's just this complete denial that it's occurring on a more widespread level. So I think that is definitely taking apart those barriers and dismantling those structures is incredibly difficult if there's not even an acknowledgement of the problem. And so that absolutely has been one of the most frustrating aspects, and one that we all need each other and our voices in unison to be able to address. Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, we would love to hear your opening remarks actually before we jump into questions. Thank you.
Sorry, Ifat, did you, in terms of opening remarks, are we all going to start it? Did you want me to start over again in terms?
Yes, please.
Okay, so let me rephrase and go back. So I'm Caitlin Casper. I'm a lawyer, an Indigenous woman, mother, advocate for Indigenous rights in Canada. As introduced by Ifat, I am Anishinaabe from Chippewas or Georgina Island. I completed my law degree in Toronto, and then I practiced law in criminal law and child welfare in the remote north of Ontario. So doing a lot of the fly-in First Nations and doing courts there and doing a lot of litigation. And I spent, and I think these topics that we're talking about today are kind of near and dear to my heart, because after practicing for about 5 years in the north, it just became so obvious how much good I could do by helping out individual persons versus how much work needed to be done on a much broader and more widespread level. So I packed up my practice in the north and I moved to Toronto so that I could do a lot more work on more widespread advocacy issues and try to do that policy change, try to take the government to court every chance I can in the working within the appellate court. So doing a lot of appeal work and trying to make sure that the law as it moves forward is respecting the rights of the people who need it the most in terms of how marginalized and vulnerable they are, and trying to make sure that the discussions that we're having in the future in terms of what law should look like, not only from our courts and our judiciary, but also from the government and also from the institutions that are on the ground and like working with people every day, that we're all reflecting the same message about the right for people to be able to have peace, security, and to know that they're going to be respected as being people of color, as being among the First Nations, and still working hard at it. It's definitely not those tasks that you succeed at overnight. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So maybe we'll do opening remarks from Mobina.
Thank you very much. I'd like to acknowledge that I come from the unceded territory, traditional lands of the Coast Salish, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. And it's an honor for me to be here. I'm really excited to be here, and I congratulate you for all your efforts in getting this organization going here. Just by way of background, I was born in East Africa to South Asian parents who were also born in East Africa, and I was a girl child. So we were 5 daughters and 1 son. And one of the first gifts my parents gave me is they always said I had to have the best education because I was equal to a boy. And that was a struggle many years ago for me. And the first gift I got from my parents was to learn that I was equal to everybody. And it wasn't easy being one of 5, being a girl with 6 children, 5 girls. Outside, people would be very tough on us and my parents, but my parents no, they're going to get the best education as any boy. So I was blessed with that skill. And then my father worked in the independence movement in Uganda, and I learned very quickly from him the gift of how important it was to be an independent country and have resolution of your own issues. And then I went to England, and so I learned the gift of education and equality, and then from him how important it was to be independent. And when I went to England, I became very involved in the apartheid movement. I was helping others to boycott the Barclays Bank because they were providing lots of resources. And the manager said to me, young woman, a young girl, in fact, go back and study. You have no role here. Apartheid will be here forever. And I want to share with you, all of you who are struggling, the best day in my life was when I saw Nelson Mandela waving. It was important because it showed to me that never, ever give up. It's never useless. And I learned this from a young age, that you just don't give up. And what I learned from that day is, yes, we are all equal and nobody can stop us. Unfortunately, I became a refugee and I had to come to Canada. And when I came to Canada and I started practicing as a lawyer, one of my challenges was I was the first South Asian woman to practice law in Canada, I'm told. And I couldn't get myself accepted. I would either be called an interpreter or I would be called an accused. I had to have lots of help to get accepted. But I learned my skill that I was equal, and I learned a lot of advocacy skills that I was not going to give up. But the one thing I also learned is to have a network, and to have a network of people who would support me, because you can't do it alone. And I had a wonderful law partner, Mr. Dome, who always stood by me when a judge gave me a tough time, saying, accused don't talk here. And he would be there for me. And then I became a member of the Senate, the first Muslim, first South Asian, and first African descent. And imagine my luck. I became a senator 1 week after 9/11. And I was sworn 1 week after 9/11. And the challenges I faced, because first of all, I was determined to take my oath on the Quran, which was never done before, but I wouldn't accept anything else. And then, so I am my own person that chooses my own path. And then racial profiling was a big issue. And I learned a lot of advocacy skills. I had those, and also policy issues, because people did not accept that there was racial profiling. And that battle still continues sometimes. And I was very fortunate that in 2002, I became the envoy to the Sudan, and I had a lot of experience then. I gained a lot of experience. I remember sitting cross-legged with my friend Jackie, and with many Sudanese women looking at issues together. And what I learned is that I was also involved in the peace process in Darfur. And as a woman, I learned it was very important to get across that rape was not acceptable. And at that time, there was nothing there, and was able to get police from Canada to come and teach the rape kits, about rape kits and protocol. And that, I understand, it still exists. So I was able to use what I, as a woman, believe, that no woman should be abused. I've learned a lot of skills, and I could share a lot with you, but for me, the most important gifts that I have learned is that equality is not negotiable. Always be independent, but have a network. Be the leader. Do not worry if you're alone. Choose that path. Learn advocacy skills and policy. Nobody can stop you. We are all one, equal people. Thank you very much.
I just want to interject here. Actually, when I was organized, well, I was on a phone call and someone said, "Oh, are you doing translation work?" And then I had to explain what we're doing and why we're organizing this conference. So I can relate to what you're saying. Caddy, we'd love to hear from you now.
All right, thank you. No, thanks so much for the invitation. Obviously, it's so wonderful to be with such incredible women, and congratulations for launching this chapter. I mean, I just wish you all the best, and it's such an important space that we need to be reflecting on peace, security from our perspectives. So I am I'm an African woman. I come from Burundi, as you mentioned earlier, which is in East Africa, a country that has been deeply impacted by civil war. I am a feminist raised by a mother who in many ways didn't define herself as a feminist, but raised us alone and always stood up for herself and taught me how to be and move in the world. My grandmother was the same, so I come from that strong line of women who have defied what the norms and boundaries that society placed around them. And I'm also a refugee. Prior to being a refugee, I was an activist, very, very involved in ensuring that women in my country have a voice and have a voice in the political space, in the civic space. We have a saying in my country that a woman is not to speak publicly, so she is spoken for. For in any formal speeches, a woman is traditionally not supposed to speak, and so I think I've tried to defy that throughout my life in various ways. And so as a result of that, I had to leave my country in very difficult circumstances, became a refugee and then arrived in Canada and discovered a whole new reality, which is the racialized reality, which hadn't really structured my world until then. But being here, of course, you're reduced to the most obvious, to what is most obvious in your host society. And so I moved from being who I was to being a refugee and a Black woman, basically. So that enabled me to understand the world that I was in and to understand Canada maybe from a different perspective. And then I've continued to move into human rights spaces and advocacy spaces. I'm going to move straight into the first question. I'll merge these opening statements with your first question, because I think it's critical on what's really challenging in advocating for racial and gender equality. I really think that at the core of it, what's the most difficult thing, and Killian alluded to it, is understanding how much racism structures and continues to structure our modern world. So racism as a system that has enabled genocide, the alienation of Indigenous people, obviously right here in Canada, on Turtle Island, across the American continent, slavery and colonialism on the African and Asian continents, the dispossession of native land, the right to self-determination in the Americas and in Oceania, and in many ways the economic inequalities, the trade inequalities that continue to exist, and symptoms of poverty are all really rooted in many ways in a racist system, which continues, as I said, to structure the world. So it is embedded in the current global order, in the very balance of power, which structures the United Nations and the world we're in, whose power are we balancing? So it's embedded in that, and in the institutions who either fund, champion, or are simply tasked with implementing the women, peace and security agenda, which we'll speak about today. So I think unless racism is really identified as that hierarchy of power, which really in many ways is the biggest threat to the current world order, but also to peace and security, and unless its effects on women globally are really understood, we will continue to miss the core of this issue, and we will find ourselves only struggling with symptoms. So in other words, it's similar to asking, for instance, male players to include more women in a game whose norms and rules are designed to only benefit men. And so I think this understanding really needs to be a core approach to peace and security, and push us to move beyond. It's wonderful that we have diverse voices and diverse women and racialized women in the peace and security circles, but I think we need to also move beyond representation to actually challenging the foundation of the table, not just seek a seat at the table, but challenging the very foundations and the inequalities of that table. So I see that a lot daily in the human rights work that I do. I see how much our international system is failing to guarantee human rights and uphold the rights of racialized women, whether it's from COVID to armed conflict to sexual violence, economic disparities, migration and displacements, environmental justice, land defense, to things even in Canada, such as housing, health, the rights of Indigenous women or sterilization of Indigenous women, which continue to this day. All of these, which should be metrics really for international peace and security. This should be the basis on which we measure international peace and security, and yet they continue and they impact racialized women in a disproportionate manner. So it's important that we are in this conversation, but it's also important that we question the foundation of those institutions and the order which enables these to continue. So that's really the conversation that excites me. That's the work that excites me, and I look forward to continuing to discuss with all of you and to creating more solidarities around that goal.
Thank you, Kady. Yasmin, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. Thank you very much for the kind invitation. Excuse me. And congratulations for launching this chapter in Canada. I very much look forward to collaborate with you all in the future. And it's really, really inspiring to hear from all of the women in the panel. I am amongst the giants today, so I'm a little bit dwarfed by all of your, inspiring words and amazing work that you've done. Before I begin with my own journey to doing the work of advocacy for the Rohingya community, I want to acknowledge that I am currently situated in the traditional territories of the Semiahmoo, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Kakate, and Tawasin First Nations. My journey to working for the Rohingya community started about 4 years ago, and it was not out of my own volition that I wanted to be in this realm or work in this field. I didn't really quite know what to do with my life at that point, but my entire journey from Myanmar to Thailand and then to Canada have all been shaped by erasure and the genocidal acts that have been continuously perpetrated upon our community. And understanding that I didn't really have not even a place at the table. I didn't have access to power. I didn't really have a real existence on this earth. That was the core I think belief that I had, that I needed to actually tackle some of those issues that stem from us being erased and being marginalized and then disenfranchised for the most part. So this was a really difficult journey to come to grasp with the idea that people don't really know about Rohingya because not only because that we're going through a genocide, but it was because the Myanmar military, which is a very, very patriarchal, classist, ableist structure institution, had made sure and continuously doing so, ensuring that we are erased. We as in the Rohingya community and many other ethnic communities that exist in Myanmar. And so working off of that understanding and recognition really helped me to define and understand and reach out to other communities, and understanding that, like Kedy and the previous panelists have mentioned, a lot of this are global trends, and they're all interconnected in many different ways to ensure that the people who are in the position of power right now and reap the benefits of our suffering continue to be in that position. And unfortunately, the worst, the worst effects of those exploitations or oppression continues to be, felt by women and girls. And so my work had kind of shifted in the last year or so from just advocacy and raising awareness around Rohingya issues to really working with various different communities ethnic communities in Myanmar to actually build allyship and alliance within and in hopes that through that we can actually have a more solid foundation in challenging the system and the status quo that is looking to exploit all of us, and hopefully that would change the current narratives that Rohingya are, either lazy, lack agency, or they are illegal immigrants, they are useless, all of that, negative connotations that people tend to have through years of propaganda and the one-dimensional depiction of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh and elsewhere. And so being able to do some of that work, to work with young people from Myanmar all over the country, and reaching out to people from various different communities in the region, especially through Milk Tea Alliance movement, had been really, really helpful in propelling the arguments and really ground myself in the work that this would need a lot more understanding of intersectionality, and trying to push that forward had been extremely rewarding in also coming back to my own experience and explaining that to myself, because a lot of times it doesn't make sense. Genocide or war crimes or crimes against humanity, mass atrocity in general, the power structure that is the current world right now, none of it makes sense. And so understanding that and being able to explain that to myself and others have been really, really helpful. And I continue to look forward to be able to do more of the work and continue to build solidarity with others who are dealing with the same kind of issues, and look forward to further discussion from today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. So maybe I'll move on to the next question, because you all kind of responded a little bit to the first one. And so it's also interesting to see how everyone's work is really stems from our personal experiences. So sometimes we just don't have the privilege to do things because, of interest or other kind of just from other commitments or interests, but it's really just from our personal experiences and our experiences of oppression and injustice. With that being said, the next question is, you have all showed tremendous courage and resilience. Your backgrounds demonstrate a long history of social justice work and advocacy. So what within you gives you that power and drive to continue this long, exhausting battle? And we'll start off with Caitlin.
I think definitely, I think the word resilience resounds with me. I think listening to everybody's stories and the different histories of the people that we all come from, one of the most powerful stories and lessons that I was always taught is that as much as it's heartbreaking and as much as it hurts your spirit to think about all of those who have not made it thus far and whose families aren't still here and who have suffered the ultimate consequences of genocide and have succumbed to that at the hands of other people, the state. It's important to remember that as individuals, we are here because of the strength of our ancestors, and that we have a role and an obligation to ourselves and to our communities, and not only a role that's important in the present day, but in our culture and our teachings. We don't think about now, we think about 7 generations ahead. And when we think about where we want our children, our grandchildren, our nieces and nephews, 7 generations ahead to be, every action that we take now to preserve our communities and every action we take to make sure that they're healthy and sustainable, those reverberations are going to be felt by the people who come after us. And so I think that that's what keeps me here and keeps me going after, you know, those longest days and all of the trauma I think that we experience all the time in the work that we do. And I definitely think that there's an aspect of self-care to that and making sure that we're taking care of our own spirits. But moving forward, it's always with those ideas, first and foremost.
Thank you so much. Mobina?
Thank you. So for me, I'm very aware that I have access, that I am a senator and I have access. And so I'm exceptionally aware of that. And so I am very persistent in making sure that none of my sisters in Canada or around the world are left behind. And so, for example, during COVID, I'm the chair of ICANN, and I have had the honor to work with women from all over the world. And being able to bring their realities to our ministers here in Canada has been my goal, and being able to get them help, because I believe that I will not stop working until women have the resources so that they can leave terrible situations. You know, in our own country, there are women who really suffer from violence. So I'm always making that voice heard. I work with women around the world, because if I don't use this amazing privilege I have and not be persistent. So to give you an example, besides working with ICANN, I'm also working on the issue of FGM. It's not a popular issue, but female genital mutilation from places where I come from, and also sadly it's here as well. And so it's not an issue that is much talked about. And I want parliamentarians to absolutely say we're going to stamp it out both here and abroad. It's something that I would like to finish this work before I resign from the Senate. And so my persistence, I just don't give up. I don't accept a no, and I try and find ways in which I can make a difference for women.
Thank you so much, Mobina. That was lovely. Kedi?
Yeah, that's so great to hear everybody. And just a reminder that this is exactly why we need these spaces. I want to start with the last part of your question, which is the fact that this is a long and exhausting battle, and just allowing ourselves to recognize how exhausting this work often is. It really, truly is. And acknowledging that and finding ways to, to rest in the midst of it, to refresh ourselves, to move away from it when we need to, I think is also very important, because we are in a space of peace and security. Everything seems so urgent, and it feels as though if you're not working on it, you are in a way betraying the cause, or betraying those with whom you're working. And I think it's really important to give ourselves that permission, especially as women, because we tend to want, when we walk into these spaces, and as racialized women, we'll want to outperform. We know that we are visible. We know that we are held to higher standards. And so we already are placing impossible standards for ourselves. And so it's important to give ourselves that permission to rest. I say this being in a space where I am on a daily basis confronted with the devastation of our world. literally every day in my inbox, all, globally, and I have to find a space to continue to be and to take care of myself and take care of those around me. So in terms of what keeps me going, it's not having the luxury or the privilege to go to bed and not be concerned by these issues. I don't have that privilege. This is my reality. It's the reality of my family, my community. I'm a mother of two daughters, two girls who are currently displaced from their home country because of these very issues, who miss their home, who miss their friends, their childhood home that they haven't seen, in 6 years. So it's very personal, and I think we need to also acknowledge that and give ourselves permission to bring that personal passion into what we do. So that is what fuels me. The desire, obviously, for a just world, a more equal one, but the knowledge that until we build one, those impacted are those who are around me. And so that just doesn't give me the luxury to completely exit. I may rest, but I will, rise up again and continue.
Much, Kelly. Yasmin?
I agree with everything that panelists have, my co-panelists have said. Definitely, I look back at a lot of the struggles that the women in my family have had to face. And like Caitlin mentioned, that we are the byproducts of our ancestors and their struggles for peace, for justice, for acknowledgement, for various kinds of privilege and access that we have today. And every single time that I come up against power structure or problems that I can't really fix, and it's out of my control, specifically from the inaccess or the lack of inclusivity in the realm of peace and security, especially in policymaking, or within my own community when I face the challenges and the discrimination that women face on the day-to-day basis. I remind myself of a story that my mom told me not about probably 2-3 years ago, of her journey from the time that we were actually fleeing out of Myanmar when I was about 3 years old. She had to basically carry me onto a ship that was a military ship, because that was the only kind that would leave from Sittwe, which is a capital of Rakhine State, where I was born. And she was around 18 or 19 at that point, because she had to be married young, because that was the only thing that women are good for at that point in time. And this is the kind of disempowerment that the military had sort of laid out for the Rohingya community, for the women to be kept closer and closer to home until they're invisibilized. And then eventually they become, the lesser part of the community, and they become the tool of fear to ensure that the community is destabilized. And so her journey, her guts, her bravery of having to take that step, because my family just wasn't in on it. They weren't very supportive of her leaving the country, knowing what it would turn out to be today, during the time that violence were extremely pervasive in Rakhine State. She carried me on the ship for about 3 days, being taunted by these military men. And the only thing she could think of was, how could I give a better future for this girl? And I just, every single time I think of that story and her having to put up that fight, and eventually, we smuggled through to Thailand through land, through the border of Thai and Myanmar. And being able to at least, read and write in Thai and now in English, being able to even have a voice, even be able to share a panel with you all today. All of this reminds me of the hard work that my mom had done, and many, many women in our family line have done. And I just, like Kenny said, I don't really have a privilege to actually ignore all of their struggles and say, I'm not going to do anything today. I'm going to live in luxury or whatever privilege I could get, whatever power access that I have, and ignore the rest of my community, the rest of the women that are truly in need of help and excuse me, and are truly in need of their voices being lifted up. So this is how I actually ground myself and try to come back to why I need to do the work in the first place. And it's really a matter of understanding that without all of us being involved and all hands on deck, it is going to be extremely difficult for other women to not be silenced, for the power structure to be challenged. And yeah, that's really the story that I keep reminding myself over and over in order to get the inspiration or to get the motivation to keep going.
Great. Wow. That was so beautiful and so inspiring to hear all of your stories. And it's interesting to also see how you guys highlight how women's identities are very relational, and particularly for racialized women, and the importance of that kind of intergenerational connection. So I wanted to maybe move on to our second question. I know we're running out of time. So I'll try to just maybe end it, see where everyone else goes with their time. If you guys are available to maybe stick around for an extra 15 minutes, then I can finish it off with one more question after this. But how do power hierarchies influence peace and security policies at the international and national level? So what are your thoughts on this? We'll start off with Caitlin.
So it's actually really interesting, because I definitely think that Canada has a lot of work to do on how international agreements, how international policies, standards are interpreted and reflected in our law, and how the spirit of them is reflected in the way that we draft legislation and the way that we construct legislation. I know that for many communities, non-marginalized and non-colored communities, it seems like Canada is so innocent, so clean, and that it's this, country that abides by all these law-abiding rules, and that just has not been our experience as Indigenous people. And I think there's such a place and in the system for international standards, especially as it relates to Indigenous communities, because I often think that the only reason sometimes that the marker has shifted forward is because Canada has been shamed into doing so. And so I think specifically, about how the Indian Act and its status of who Indigenous women are, and this pervasive denial of even who we are as human beings and as being eligible to be part of our own communities, and being alienated and it made illegal for us to live in our communities because we chose to marry somebody outside of being Indigenous, or because we wanted to get a job outside of our community. And and how many arguments were brought to the Canadian government for decades about how such gender inequality and such just outright racism and just complete lack of respect for human rights. And it wasn't until we brought that to the UN, and it wasn't until we made those arguments on the international front and really shamed Canada into seeing kind of what was behind the curtain in terms of how it was treating its own Indigenous people, that anything changed. And I mean, the Indian Act is still a huge issue. Gender equality is still a huge issue. These things have not suddenly become better because Canada decided to make a few changes to a few provisions. The fact that the Indian Act exists in its entirety is a shame on Canada as a country. So I definitely think that there's just such a big place for us to do work, not only in Canada, but also to make sure that those systems on the international front are stronger and made stronger, and to really encourage countries to abide by those standards. There's so much more work left to do, because I really do think that they're incredibly important in order to tear those hierarchies down. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mobina?
So I agree with what Caitlin's saying about tearing the hierarchies down. And what frustrates me very much, even when I was the envoy to the Sudan, is that can we in Canada have this scenario in our minds that we value equality, we value all nations. But when I was doing the work, it really frustrated me that Canada would look at the US and our European partners and work with them. And that sometimes does not meet with the Sudanese people, the NGOs, and often it is about what that country wants rather than what the benefit of the people on the ground is. And I found that very frustrating. And one of the things that I would really like Canada to look at is don't automatically turn to the usual partners. We need to work with other partners. We need to work with African nations. We need to work with Asian nations. We've got to stop automatically working with the usual partners. And I say this because at home, we think we are very equal. But in the international field, we are not leaders. We are followers. And we've got to stand up. We as Canadians have to get our government to stand up and really do what Canadians want, is to be a leader. And Canada is not a leader.
Wow, that was very powerful. Thank you so much, Mobina. Kadi?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very loaded question. It's a heavy question. Power hierarchies, how do they influence peace and security? I mean, it could be an entire 4-year course. I mean, obviously, outside at the international level, and I mentioned this earlier, the very institution that is tasked with maintaining international peace and security, the UN Security Council, is made up of 5 states who are largely responsible for arms exports. The biggest polluters in terms of climate and therefore environmental damage. They're responsible for resource extraction and the ravages that go with that. And so I think one of the key points to take away is the double standards that is witnessed by these states, and the need for us to address them. When you're looking at the current context we're in with COVID, we know that, for instance, there is a vaccine that is that's available. We're getting vaccinated right here in Canada. I mean, in the meantime, people have died in thousands and are continuing to die in thousands in India and around the world. And countries, including Canada, continue to refuse to waive access to share in the intellectual property rights for that vaccine. So it's about, on one hand, we see that a lot in the work that I'm in, professing human rights, professing that we are a human rights abiding country and having these principles. But when you look at them, then you realize that we're not really practicing what we're preaching. Because how could we be for peace and security and then export arms, for instance? It just doesn't add up, right? Or have nuclear weapons, or again extract resources and so on and so forth. So I think the key question is really about policy coherence, and this is where I was challenging us earlier to really begin to challenge the system itself and challenge these assumptions, and ensuring that we are policy coherent across the board. And without that, and without addressing the balance of power, which I was mentioning earlier, then we will continue to have those countries who don't have that much power be on the margins and suffer the consequences of what these big nations are putting forward. So that is, the impact is huge in terms of conflict, but also in terms of conflict prevention and conflict resolution. Now we've got institutions like the Human Rights Council, which no longer function. And we have to also speak about that our multilateral system right now is paralyzed. It is not doing what it's supposed to be doing because states are vetoing right, left, and center. And the states that are doing that are the ones who are committing those very crimes as well. So it's really about getting to the root cause of power and redistributing power as the only path forward. And I think that's a feminist analysis that has been, crafted and developed and articulated by feminists for so long in this space.
Thank you so much, Kari. That was great. Yasmin?
Working off of what Kari just said, I think that in the humanitarian world, a lot of the narratives, or a lot of the actually this includes the advocacy world as well, the neoliberalist narratives really enforces the idea that we actually require and necessitate the existence of humanitarianism, because the exploitation comes from various different imperialist states that continue to reproduce the colonialist ideals, and continue to exploit people in the global South specifically, have done a really good job to do both of the things at the same time, being dubious and not coherent in terms of the policies, and understanding that same power structure or hierarchies really decide who gets to be heard in the victims community or the impacted communities. In many cases, it actually, the power structure itself really creates an inequitable access to power, or access to change, or access to the ability to exercise one's agency. And oftentimes women and non-binary people are heavily disenfranchised in the process, or that they would have to put up with a lot of struggles in order to be heard or to be included at the table. And we would have a lot of these, a lot of the actors in the realm congratulate each other for having basically a token woman or a token non-binary person involved. And there's such a hypocrisy in this realm of work that it sometimes gets really exhausting, especially when women are excluded continuously and having to actually almost put up a fight in order to be heard. And I'm talking in very specific context of Myanmar and ASEAN region. What I've seen is that it's a natural order of things when men are in the room, or when decisions are made not by the impacted communities but rather by the state that wield the power or have exploited their people. And I think that in order to actually move away from working off of what already exists, obviously women would have to be included. But then, like Kari said earlier, we would need to challenge the idea that this is a natural state of things and that this should be the way things are. like in the case of Myanmar right now, because there is an ongoing coup being staged by the Myanmar military junta since February 1st. There are, there is an attempt, and there has been an establishment of the National Union government, which is basically probably can be equated to a government in exile, because right now they don't really have the control over the country, and the military is still hunting them down. A lot of these are people or politicians who have been elected in the 2020 election, and what the human rights defender in Myanmar are trying to do right now, especially the women's rights advocates, they're all trying to influence the policies and the rewriting of the constitution, or the policy that would help propel the narratives that the country actually have to come to a reckoning, and that we need to ensure that people, especially women from various ethnic communities who have endured the systemic, not just systemic racism, but also misogyny and sexism within the practice of the military to psychologically terrorize women. All of this are talked about, and that we have a reconciliation process ongoing, not just when the coup is over or when the military fails or in the next step, but really while we are trying to work things and put a foundation to the federal democracy that Myanmar wants to see. And so it all of this would require a lot more listening, and I think that it hasn't been done as much in the policy making realm, and I truly hope that the more we are adamant about not just inclusivity but the challenging of the status quo, the more we would be able to get people to start to change the system and really put into the system what needs to happen, which is the equity of us all.
We have such a fantastic group of women. I was wondering if we could take 2 questions maybe from the audience.
So yeah, before we do take questions, I was just reflecting on what you all were saying, and the importance of really first acknowledging Canada, being complicit and responsible, and how Canada has, or taking responsibility of how Canada has been complicit and perpetuated a lot of these injustices and a lot of some of the issues that are going on. And it's one thing to talk about inclusion and to talk about justice, and then it's another thing to really give people the voice and the power to make adequate and progressive change. So it really to take action is something else. So I love how you all highlighted that. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to write it in the chat. If not, I will move forward with the last question. So, okay, so I guess I'll just go on with the last question. So what are the most critical changes that we must make to face the future effectively? And I know this is a very ambiguous question and that there's so much that we can do, but what do you guys think is one thing or a few things that we can do to face the future effectively and to make effective change? Caitlin?
Yeah, so I'll start. I think every community is going to have a different answer, and it's going to be slightly tailored and structured to individual and specific community needs. I think, though, there are a few threads that we can pull in terms of what we know makes a healthy community, in terms of what we know creates sustainability, and in terms of the ability for everybody to be able to exercise their own independence and their own ability to be able to thrive. And for us as Indigenous people in Canada, it's incredibly important that whatever kind of critical change in the future that comes, it respects the sovereignty of all of the First Nations in and of themselves and who they are traditionally in this country. And I know that part of that idea of sovereignty is an ability to exist not on the whim of another, and to exist not based on somebody else's providing you with money, or providing you with social assistance or social welfare, or it's really having the capacity to be able to do that for your own people, to be able to do that for yourself in a way that is constructed by you and delivered by you. And I think that is really, if I could put Indigenous communities in any position within Canada, it would be to make sure that we are able to take care of ourselves. And I think that a lot of that is based on resources. A lot of it is based on Canada acknowledging the disregard and disrespect for the treaties that were signed. And a lot of that is based on this mutual access of resources, where we are both able to sustain our own cultures and to be able to succeed within the so many resources that this country has, so many. And yet we see this entire country, Indigenous people live off of 0.2% of the land mass, and yet we are its original peoples, right? And those treaties did not agree to 0.2% of the land mass. And it's impossible to sustain communities when you have such a complete lack of access to any type of resource for us to exist. So I think that when we think about how our communities are going to thrive moving forward, we need to be able to sustain ourselves, and we need to have the resources and capacity to do that. And it's not capacity and resources that are given to us. It's those that we can create for ourselves and that are respected and acknowledged as being our own, and not at the whim of another state government or existence of power, but it comes from internally, from within.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Mobina?
So for me, I'm really preoccupied with how diverse are we really as a country. We have this image that we are a very diverse country, but when I look around myself, I see in the Foreign Service just one deputy minister out of 14 that's ethnic. I see the federal service, yes, they have met the ticks, everybody meets the ticks, but in the senior leadership, there isn't the leadership that should exist. How many people, ambassadors of color do we have? So I have some real preoccupations with that. And I don't want our government to just stick saying, okay, we have these many. I'm asking, what about the leadership? How many do you have in leadership? And my absolute preoccupation is that we all know there is an election coming. And there was a momentum with the Black Lives Matter issue. And I'm concerned that when we come back, we may return to the same old ways. And so for those of you who are listening, please work with me to make sure that we don't come back to the same old ways and lose that momentum that we have. And it's not a matter of just ticking a box. It's a matter of who's leading us. And if we look around, it is not people around this call.
Thank you so much. That was great. Ketty, we look forward to hearing you speak.
I mean, I want to say that we don't have a choice, right, in terms of changing and in terms of how we address the future. We won't have a future unless we change. This is the first thing. Our very existence is being challenged. Our planet right now is the existence of our planet, or our ability to exist on the planet is being challenged. And we cannot envisage a future unless we truly reform. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is that I think change is inevitable. There are strategies which each one of us in our positions and our, from our own spheres of influence can drive. But I really think that, change is truly inevitable because the current system we're in is not sustainable. The level of pain and anguish and conflict that we see across the world is unprecedented, and I don't think that it is going to be sustainable for very long, largely because there's a growing understanding and awareness amongst people who for too long have been left at the margins that this isn't a just system. And increasingly, just as we're creating this space, increasingly they're demanding a different model. And so we can participate in that, we can feed that movement, we can create solidarities, but whether we do or not, I think that change is coming. The foundations of the current order, and I really come back to the current order because we can tend to forget that the model we're in is just about a century old, right? Colonization was just half a century ago, 60 years ago, so at least on the African continent. A lot of this has not been how we've always operated in our world. And so it's important also to put this back into perspective and realize that we are in a specific moment in the history of the world, and that this is a phase and that it is possible to change. And when we think that way, that opens us up to really imagining new models and completely fresh perspectives and new ways of being and relating to each other. For me, the principles must be justice, so a rights-based world. That has to be the model. The second of it is solidarity. Each community can struggle for its own rights, but unless we understand that these struggles are interconnected, that the arm that's exported from Canada to Saudi Arabia and reaches Yemen and wounds a Yemeni woman and her family, displaces them to the region, brings her back to Canada. Unless we see that ecosystem, then we will remain stuck on our own individual individual struggles, which are all relevant. But we really need to broaden our perspective and look at it from a global one, because the forces that are oppressing the world are interconnected to themselves. That's really crucial to understand. And so I think solidarity is absolutely essential, and resilience, resilience, the understanding that we are not the first ones. This generation is not the first one going through these challenges, and that we continue to move forward with the vision of a different world order, certainly, and an understanding that we are deserving of that. We are deserving of peace. We are deserving of joy. We're deserving of an environment where we thrive, where our children don't have to hide away from bombs and don't have to suffer from genital mutilation or sterilization. And so that can fuel us and give us the courage to continue.
That was great. Thank you so much, Ketty. And lastly, Yasmin.
Apart from agreeing with everyone else, I think that the important thing to do and continue to do, and something that is going to continue to be important, is education, and education in the critical race theory or critical thinking, encouragement to, for people to actually educate themselves about the intersectionality issues, the how oppressions are all quite interconnected, as previously noted. All of this needs to actually become a little bit more important than how it is now. I think that unless you're excuse me, unless you're in this realm, or unless you are familiar with advocacy or are in social justice, it's difficult to explain intersectionality or the power structure or privilege, access to power, all of this stuff to a layperson. And it shouldn't be an elitist thing. It shouldn't be an exclusive type of knowledge or understanding at all, because we all live and breathe it. And so educating one another about these issues and really tie all of us back together, so that the solidarity isn't just built on, oh, I've struggled, you've struggled too, but rather, who are the perpetrators and why are they so successful at keeping us at bay? Why are they so successful at keeping us, on the lower strata of the society? And the one thing that I think would really be important, especially in the Myanmar case and the global South, is a lot of the times there is this narrative that women should just talk about sexual and gender-based violence, and it needs to change. I think that every single issue is a woman's issue, not just something that has to do with rape or sexual assault. And so, the idea that patriarchy is a normal mode of operation, is a normal order of things, should really start shifting. Women in this realm, like in advocacy or in humanitarianism, should not just be allowed to talk about issues that are viewed as women's issues, but everything, even political, even economic, anything that is traditionally viewed as something that men would know more. It sounds ridiculous, but it does really happen in real life. And especially in the case of Rohingya, I really cannot emphasize how many times I've been invited to just talk about sexual and gender-based violence. And that's just, there's something very, very wrong about that. And so emphasizing that education and understanding that all issues are quite interconnected, and educating other people, raising awareness around the future that we want, and the kind of challenges that women of color or people from various different groups that have been disenfranchised usually face, would be important, and tie them back together. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. That was very just inspiring, and it was so great to hear you guys talk. And it's really important to recognize that this battle is ongoing, and that the burden should not fall on racialized people, and that we cannot do this without having allies, and that we need to educate everyone and raise awareness. Because these issues impact everyone. And like Yasmin said, they are interconnected. And it's really, it's really important that we recognize as well our positions of privilege and ensure that we are making these spaces accessible, to give voice to others, and to ensure that there's progressive change. So with that being said, I'm going to pass this back to Ifat, for just to conclude our discussion for today and start off the closing remarks from the panelists. So go ahead, Ifat.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so thankful to all of you. I'm actually also very thankful to Ezra. There's a reason why I've asked her to moderate this panel, because I want her to feel empowered. I want her to understand that this is also her space and she belongs in it. And I'm so happy, and I want to say that she has done an amazing job. I'm just very proud of her. I am so thankful to everybody because you've spoken on things that are very close to my heart. Um, um, Jackie, there's something you said was very interesting for me because I think that's what I brought up with Ambassador Jenkins was the fact that this organization gives us a sense of belonging. It is our sense of belonging. And having said that, if you are interested in a project that you would like us to address and work on, please approach us. We're very open since we just started. Also to the panelists, we would love for you to serve as an advisor for us. We would love for you to guide us, assist, work with us. Solidarity, something that is also very dear to us, is working with Indigenous people. We have expertise from various fields and we'd love to partner up. Caitlin, I'm targeting you. Thank you so much. So for now, we're going to hear the closing remarks from Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins, our founder.
Thanks. And you know, this has been such an amazing panel. I dare not even say anything because I think everything's been said so well. So I have the privilege of, first of all, just saying thank you to Ifat and Ezra, because I know we've had lots of conversations about the launch, and it's always so nice to actually see it happen and know all the hard work that went into putting this together. So thank you for that. Of course, thank you all the panelists. Ambassador O'Neill, my computer went off right when you were talking at the beginning, but I know you said some nice things about me, so thank you very much for that. I do appreciate it. Yes, the panelists were all amazing. Thank you so much. And as Ifat said, please stay in touch. It's always great to see a new chapter being launched with WCAPS. And, you know, there's so many things to hear about from women in different parts of the world. And so you know, it's our privilege now really to hear voices from Canada, women of color voices from Canada. So we really do look forward to hearing more and thought-provoking. This exactly says my connection's unstable, so I'll talk slow. Thanks to all of the headquarters staff. You met Shalonda very briefly, and Netta met her, and Ileana, thank you for everything that you're doing. If you're interested in joining WCAPS, just a reminder, wcaps.org. And that's the best way to join chapters, because you can actually check it off on the membership form. So certainly go to the website and you can do that very quickly. It's free, so there's no dues right now. So please definitely do that. And just a shout out to my colleague, Steve Seidemann. I shout out to him because we've been talking for a long time about a chapter in Canada. So I hope that Ifat and Ezra, you will make acquaintance with him at some point, because this is something that he's been interested in for a long time. And, you know, I have a lot of notes. There's so many good things that were said. I won't take time to really reiterate a lot of them because they were amazing. And I just say thank you, everyone. It's exciting, like I said, to have a new chapter. And we look forward to hearing more from our Canadian colleagues and educating us on issues that you address in Canada. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back to you, Ifat. You can say, I guess, so long to everyone. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you again. Like we have our webpage up. Please check in with us. If you have any ideas, please come to us. We would love to work with you. As for, of course, we have Ambassador O'Neill. Women, peace, and security is very important. I'm also Bangladeshi, so women, peace, and security is very important for us, for the community. We are here to, I mean, it was by design and by default that we have so many women on the panel who came as refugees in Canada, including the moderator. So this is great. I'm just so happy. This is our space, right? I do want to give a quick shout out to someone, actually, the former registrar for the mechanism online and watching us hear what you had to say. So it was very, hopefully we'll have him speak some time too. So genocide is very important for us, for our chapter, for our history. Again, thank you, Ambassador O'Neill. Would love to work with you also. Looking forward. I think that's it. Please, please join the organization. We have great events. I mean, we have lots of wonderful speakers, and we mentioned the United Nations. We do have a chapter in New York, based, a lot of interesting work, and we're going to connect. If you need connection, if you need to work on an issue, if you want us to approach the UN, and I don't mean the Security Council, just the Security Council, but other platform I think we have some access. So please, we'd love to assist in any way addressing your concerns. We want a partnership. Thank you again. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for trusting us, Ambassador Jenkins. Thank you for trusting us with WCAPS. We hope that we don't fail you in any sense. And if we do, please tell us, how we can improve. Always it's a process, right? It's a process. And next time, Ambassador Jenkins is going to wear a sari. So yay. And so thank you again. Thank you.
All right. Have a great evening,
Bye.
everybody. Take care.